Good evening, I'm Pallavi Ghosh and you're watching the Super Saturday debate with me. US President Donald Trump has warned Iran's leaders that America is going to respond severely if they crack down on the protesters. He said, if Iran starts killing people like they have in the past, America will get involved. America will be hitting Iran very, very hard where it hurts it the most. He also clarified that he didn't mean sending troops, but rather taking strong economic or military action. But Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has criticized the protesters in a televised speech. He's accused them of ruining their own streets and country to placate the president of another country. The speech, aired on state television, was met with chants of death to America from the crowd. There have been large protests which have targeted Iran's leadership. There have been huge crowds who have taken to the streets of Iran's capital, Tehran, and other major cities in what happens to be one of the most significant public challenge to the country's clerical establishment in years. The turmoil spreads, and we ask you the big question, is Iran next for Donald Trump? But more importantly, the pictures which really stand out is that it's the women who are now taking the lead in standing up to Khamenei. And when women and people hit the streets and they stand up, is this a movement of big change in Iran? That's the question which we're going to ask in a short while from now.
We're watching the situation very carefully. I've made the statement very strongly that if they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard where it hurts.
Joining me for this special discussion this evening is Lieutenant General retired Sanjay Kulkarni. He's a former DG, Infantry, Indian Army and security expert. Ashok Sajjanhar, former diplomat. Sushant Sareen, Senior Fellow, ORF. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. Mr. Sareen, I want to begin with you. I can see those very powerful pictures, of this woman who's smoking and she's showing the butt at the Ayatollah Khomeini. Young people also out on the streets. Massive economic crisis. Many think that this is just going to be a flash in the pan and all will be forgotten soon. Would you agree with that point of view, or do you think this time round things are different?
Look, there are a couple of things, Pallavi, that are different. Because we've seen some protests like this in the past as well. You remember that case when that girl was killed by the police because she was not wearing a headscarf correctly. Then, protests broke out. But what is different now is that, one, the protest started with a group of people who were one of the bulwark of the regime, which is the bazaris, the traders. And that is a very, very powerful lobby inside Iran. And secondly, it is around economic factors. An economy which is tanking very fast, and the lives of people are becoming very difficult and miserable, really. And the regime clearly has no solutions to those problems. They are trying to do some patchwork. So when the economy starts biting, and in any case, the regime isn't exactly the most popular, and these are not protests which are limited to a few urban centers. Apparently, these protests have taken place across the length and breadth of Iran. So it's a very, very serious situation. But I think to write the obituary of the regime would be somewhat premature at this point in time. Even more so if the Americans were to resort to any precipitate action, either bombing. That's the only thing they can do. I don't think they have any intention of sending in an occupying force or putting boots on the ground. So even if they bomb this place, it will actually strengthen the regime rather than weaken it. And if they don't bomb it, then I would imagine that the regime probably still has enough in store to massacre a lot of people and retain its control. Probably becomes more unpopular. But the one last thing I want to say is, look at it in the context of how quickly these protests are now playing out on the streets of Iran. The last protests were just about a year, 2 years back. And suddenly you have another major set of protests taking place. And this is something which should worry the regime because it's becoming more and more unpopular. It's losing its legitimacy. And the anger on the streets is manifesting itself far more frequently than what the regime would, or can manage really.
You know, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, there are two things which are very interesting over here. One is that Donald Trump is not doing a Venezuela here. He's not suddenly jumping in. He's just threatening and he's saying, I'm not going to bomb, but I'm going to keep a cold watch. And he's talking about economic sanctions as well. That's one thing he's doing. Second, you're not seeing any crushing of these protests. Do you get a sense that Ayatollah is actually doing a mind game where he's telling the people, look, you're spoiling your streets, you're pandering to the American ego? Is there a shift in his strategy? And is there a shift in American president's strategy as well?
Pallavi, thank you very much. And good evening to my fellow panelists. First and foremost, it is very important to understand why these crises have occurred suddenly. And it is, I wouldn't say very suddenly, but yes, over a very short period of time. Primarily because of the economic distress. That is the first thing. And sanctions over the years, since say 2006 for the bank, the 2010, since Obama regime until now, to Trump regime, the sanctions they made, the agricultural distress, water shortage. 33% poverty in Iran today. 1% people own 30% wealth. And imagine the currency. What it was in 2020, 42,000 riyals to a dollar, to 1.4 million riyals, it turned into toilet paper. So with this kind of a thing, the sanctions, with so much of shortages, obviously the Iranians are protesting the regime. The Iranians do not want foreign intervention. And that is where it's different from Venezuela. Trump understands. Obviously, the Iranians have, the US have the intelligence in Iran. They know when to intervene, but right now is not the time to intervene. Raza Pahlavi can do what he wants to do, but he's not being very popular. He was in Israel, after which Israel attacked Iran. So do you think Raza Pahlavi has that kind of the strength to do what he wants? Obviously poverty in Iran, the kind of shortages, then the dams constructed by Taliban, again resulting in water shortage in Iran. So there's agriculture distress, economic problems, you have sanctions, a whole lot of it. And obviously, Khamenei himself, though he's 86-year-old, his son is in waiting, but then he doesn't hold that much. But the Americans, I'm sure, wouldn't want to intervene at this point of time. They rather watch and wait. Well, threats can be passed on. We will do this, you shoot out, we'll shoot out. I'm told the hospitals are getting filled. There are lots of men, already over 200, I understand, have died, over 2,300 arrested, internet, completely backed up. So all that is there. But Iranians are protesting within, and the best is to leave it to Iran for the timing. At least for a week, let's observe what's going on in Iran. I don't think any country will intervene. And they weren't. Iran's friends should have come forward to help Iran, because Iran's helped a lot of people, a lot of countries. I don't know where the help has gone. Suddenly, Iran's left isolated, all alone. It happened during Raza Pahlavi. His father, when Muhammad Pahlavi was the king, Shah of Iran, it happened then also. He died in Egypt. Of all the places, nobody would want him. So this is the situation in Iran. But Iran is old civilization. I'm sure they know how to handle it. And unfortunately, no alternative at this point of time. So
but
they have to carry on the comment.
Mrs. Sajanhara, I want to ask you this question. There is no political freedom there. There's a young population over there. There are women who are now becoming brazen and they are standing up. There's an economic hardship happening there. Clearly, Khamenei is very, very unpopular. So isn't this absolutely a fodder for the American system, for the American president? I'm sure that he will have many supporters if he decides to just go in. What is stopping him from doing so?
Yeah, thank you very much, Pallavi, for having me. Let me first of all say that, in another few weeks' time, the Islamic regime would be celebrating the 46th anniversary of coming to power. It was exactly on the 11th of February 1979 that Ayatollah Imam Khamenei, he came from Iran, he came from Paris, and he took over the reins of power. I have been following what has been happening in Iran over these years, and I can say that this is absolutely the worst crisis that this regime has ever faced. There have been many crises in the past also. The most severe of them was this Mata Amini, the young girl who was incarcerated and she died in prison. This was in 2022. So that time also we had a large number of protests, but this is nothing like that. You look at the cities; it has very quickly it has spread to all this. It's not only Tehran, it is not Isfahan, it is not Shiraz, it is Mashhad, it is Qom, it is Tabriz, it is everywhere it is happening. Number two, what I would like to say is that, if anyone thinks that the Americans are out of it, they would be very sadly mistaken. That the Israelis are out of it, they are very sadly mistaken. I'm sure that all these protests, they have been spread, they have been fueled, they have been supported both by the CIA and the Mossad. It's not that, there is some spontaneity as far as these protests are concerned, but definitely Americans are involved and CIA and the Israelis are also involved in a very active way. I think things are very difficult for the Iranians. They are possibly, Pallavi, in the weakest position that they find themselves in. All the support that they had given to Hamas, who were supporters of Iran, that is gone, that is declined. Hezbollah has declined. Houthis are much weaker today. As far as the Syrian regime is concerned, also very weak. So they find themselves extremely, at the receiving end. I understand that the Ayatollah Khamenei has been taken to Mashhad, that is the Islamic stronghold hideout, which has the shrine of Imam Reza. Now, I quite agree with what General Kulkarni has said, that the son of Reza Pahlavi, the Shah of Iran, who fled in 1979, he does not have any support there. But you would recall that in 1963, when the United Kingdom replaced Mossadegh and brought in Reza Pahlavi, he was the facade. They were operating through him in Iran. So here also, there is no alternative as such, but definitely the son of Shah Reza Pahlavi himself, he can be the facade, and the Americans and the Israelis can continue to manage him from behind, and he acts as the puppet, as in fact in Venezuela we see Delcy Rodriguez doing all the bidding of the Americans at the moment.
Mr. Serene, he doesn't want to do Venezuela clearly in Iran. Donald Trump is waiting and watching. Maybe he's going to wait to see whether it crumbles on its own. Or is it because he's worried that, I mean, that's a very strong, that's a very strange thing to say when it comes to Donald Trump, because he doesn't seem to be worried about what people think of him. But in Venezuela, after Venezuela, he faced a lot of criticism. Do you think in the case of Iran, he really wants to avoid that? Or is he looking for an alternative to Khamenei who will be able to keep the country together and serve his purpose as well?
Look, I think as far as Donald Trump is concerned, he doesn't give a damn about what the rest of the world thinks.
Yeah, I agree with
He's,
you with that. Yeah.
He's going to go ahead and do what he thinks is right. Look, put yourself in Donald Trump's shoes or in the Israeli shoes. You see an Iranian regime which is tottering in many ways. It's very shaky. And if not now, then when? This is the time to give it a push. Now, yes, maybe you can destabilize this regime. Maybe you can even, deprive it of power. But then what after that? Now, Ambassador Sajjanar says that, okay, maybe you will install somebody like Reza Pahlavi's son onto the throne or as the president. But they tried this kind of a thing in Iraq, right? Where they went in with boots on the ground. They had absolutely no alternative in place, and they pitted Iraq, in a civil war for almost 10 years. Iraq still hasn't stabilized the way it should have stabilized. You want to do the same in Iran, where the problems are even more wicked than in the case of Iraq. You might have breakaway, movements starting off in Iran. For example, in the southeast of Iran, the Baloch are already rebelling. In the north, you have the Azeris who could rebel. You have other ethnic groups. It's not as though the Persians are in a majority on their own. So Iran presents a big problem, and if Iran gets destabilized, then I don't see how the rest of the region can remain unaffected by what happens in Iran. So it might suit the imperial interest of the United States to see Iran destabilized completely. But does it suit the interests of other regional players like India and the other neighbors of Iran? I'm not quite sure of that. I don't think it serves anybody's interest to see Iran. I don't have a problem if the Islamic regime was to give way to a more progressive, a more enlightened kind of a government in Iran. I would not shed a tear for this regime. But the fact of the matter remains, you have absolutely no alternative in place. And yes, given the kind of bull in a China shop approach which the Americans have, they could go ahead and bomb the hell out of a particular place. But yeah, bombing is the easy part. Controlling the day after is the difficult part. And on that, I don't see what options they have.
Lieutenant General Kulkarni, do you think now Khamenei will also be under pressure to at least change things? I mean, the economic crisis, I don't know how he's going to deal with that immediately. But there are other issues. There are young people from Iran. Many of them have fled the country. They're working elsewhere. But there are women who are crying to break free. There are young people. Do you think Ayatollah Khamenei, when he's trying to keep his country together, he will be forced to bring about that change in the society and, among the politics of it?
Probably the reformist president should come forward now, because he's supposed to be quite a reformist, with Khamenei being able to tell him, you can now take charge, and a little bit of communicating with everybody, because despite American sanctions, there was a lot of things that are flowing in, and to begin with, even from 2010 onwards, and the Americans have been penalizing even the French. The Americans haven't hesitated to penalize the Germans, the Swedes, anybody and everybody who assisted and helped Iran. And there's strong sanctions against Iran. And now China has had a deal of $400 billion for oil with Iran. Nothing seems to be moving. And the Chinese haven't come forward as yet to help them in food crisis, because there's tremendous economic distress in Iran at this point of time. Water shortage in Tehran, the second largest city of Del Belta, also under tremendous water shortage. You have no agriculture. The rural, complete poverty is extremely, extremely high. So there is a lot, but the Iranians alone can sort it out. I don't think any foreign intervention, definitely not West. The Iranians, I'm sure Ambassador Sajjana will agree with me, the Iranians hate the West. Whoever may be in power, they just can't stand the West. They may be they have a 10-15% of population wanting to go back to the 79 or 60 type. But that's very small. Basically, the Iranians are quite apart, quite forward-looking. And the Iranian option is the only option. If Americans think they can bomb Iran, not possible. Yes, interventions here, there, maybe even Reza Pahlavi won't come back to Iran so easily. I think it's a wait and watch. And the only way I personally feel is the Iranians will sort out, and the reformist president, who's right now position, is supposedly good. I don't know how things have really gone out of control so badly that the sanctions have affected it, and probably no way. I think alternative is very difficult, and that's something Khamenei seems to be enjoying that, but Khamenei has to vacate. He will move out, and he will give way to the reformist president to handle it. That is how I see it. Yeah.
Mr. Sajjanhar, there are two things over here. Russia, China, friends of Iran. They're not exactly very good friends of America, not at all. Second, oil. That's the mainstay of the Iranian economy on their oil and petroleum and natural gas exports. Venezuela was actually about oil. So for America to step into Iran directly would serve their two purposes. One, deal with Russia and China on one hand, and of course, could it be all about the oil then eventually?
Pallavi, I think you're very right. You see, as far as Iran is concerned, it is just next door to Russia, and it is not all that far away from China. So, as far as Venezuela is concerned, America could have got away with it because it is far away from both Russia and China. So America gets hold of the assets. But in terms of its strategic proximity, it is not there to either Russia or China. But Iran is different, and Iran has, let's say, a population of about 80 million. It's not a small country; it's a huge country. But oil assets are there. That having been said, let me also mention that there have been several people in the Iranian administration who have been reasonably progressive, reasonably liberal, who had wanted to do business with the United States. Hashmi Rafsanjani, he was the president. He was very, positively disposed. After that, after Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, you had Khatami. Khatami was very positively disposed. Even Masoud Pezeshkian, the current president, you see, as far as Mr. Khamenei is concerned, he is not going to relent. That, as far as Shia Islam is concerned, it is a part of their belief that, sacrifice is shahadat, is something that you look forward to and you engage in, you go in for that. So as far as Khamenei is concerned, there is no question of working with him. But I think, many, if either they get Shah Reza Pahlavi's son as the facade, or they try to engage with and try to promote some of the more progressive elements of the government, because I'm sure there would be. They would also have seen the writing on the wall that things are really going downhill. And that is how, it was during Khatami's time that we signed the JCPOA, in 2015. It is only after Trump came and then he said, we have to get out of it. Okay. So maybe, I'm sure at this moment, the Americans are definitely engaging with I'm sorry, my apologies. Okay. So I'm sure the Americans are engaging and seeing if there are any alternatives to the current regime that exists in Iran.
Okay, Mr. Sareen, Venezuela, then he threatens Colombia, then there is this whole Greenland thing, and then it's a tough talk to Iran as well, then telling about Russian oil exports and so on and so forth. And just moving out of Iran for a bit, is it the big brother who's trying to now flex his muscles more and more? And how much more do you see him going further?
Pallavi, you're asking me a question to which I don't think anybody, any of the 8 billion people of this planet can answer, because the madness of a man is in the man himself. I'm neither a psychiatrist nor can I, an astrologer who can predict how he'll wake up probably today morning and say something else. And then maybe 6 hours later, he'll flip around and probably target some other country. I don't know what he's going to do. But the fact of the matter remains that I think at one level, the Americans have at least shed that veneer of diplomacy, and the ugliness of imperialism is manifesting itself in its full glory. And they're making no apologies about it. They're not making any bones about it. They're telling the rest of the world that we have the power, we can do it, and if you don't like it, you lump it. I think that's the message they've delivered to their allies. That's the message they've delivered to their adversaries. That's at one level. But just to return to Iran, look, the fact of the matter remains that within Iran, you also have a deep state. And while there might be reformists, as my other two colleagues are saying, and I don't disagree with them, there probably are reformists. There would be people in Iran who would want to, shed some of the baggage of the Islamic regime and move forward in step with the rest of the world, end their ostracization, end their isolation. But the problem is going to be that there is a very, very strong lobby within Iran, which would be averse to doing any such thing. And there will be some kind of a struggle for power. It's not going to be, I doubt if it will be a very peaceful transition, and the people like the IRGC and others will simply lay down and play dead and let the others take. That is going to be the death of these guys, right? So I don't see how clergy is going to give up. I don't see how the deep state, as it can be called in Iran, is going to give up. And there will be that tussle. The problem is that we don't know how this is going to exactly play out, because there is no other contender who has come out to say that, look, I am the guy that the rest of the country can rally behind. And there is no sign as of now of the clergy or the deep state or the establishment relenting from the kind of position they've taken. They still think they can tinker around, throw a few crumbs here and there, and manage. And they have brought out their own crowds to challenge the other crowd.
Okay.
So, it
yeah.
is all the makings of a mess, which is what we are looking at right now.
Thank you very much. We are running out of time. Thank you so much, Mr. Serene. Thank you very much, Mr. Sanjay Kulkarni, Lieutenant General Sanjay Kulkarni, as well as Mr. Ashok Sanjay. That's all we have time for now. Well, those pictures are certainly very powerful of women standing up. And as they say, when women and people stand up, change cannot be too far behind. Thank you so much for watching.